So recently I ran into a printer problem that literally made no sense. Somebody ended up calling me over to go and fix their printer, and that was when I seen it. This printer just completely stopped working. When normally printers break, it actually has an error message, but this was the first time I've seen a printer that was broken, and it did not display that, and it actually looked like it was working perfectly fine, but then when they would try to print something, it just wouldn't print with no error message. And the weird part is that multiple people had already tried fixing this printer. So what was the issue? So when I had first walked over to this printer, the first thing I asked was what happened to this printer? Like, when did we find this out? What exactly happened when this started? And they told me that earlier that day, everything was working fine. Then suddenly the printer just stopped responding. Documents were getting sent from the computer to the printer and there was no response. There was no sound, there was no alert, no movement, no nothing. So the first thing I thought is maybe the printer just froze. Sometimes printers do that. So I tried the most basic fixture first, which is turn off the printer and turn it back on. Obviously waiting a couple seconds in between. And the printer powered up normally. No strange noises, no warnings, and everything looked the way that it should have. So I went to go and try to print, and still, as we gathered around, nothing printed. So sadly, that was when I realized this wasn't going to be an easy fix, which of course we are praying for those. So at this point, I started to go through the basics and the beginning of like trying to see what the issue is, the troubleshooting startup, I guess, I don't know. Ultimately, walked up to the printer, checked if it had paper inside. I know that's like a simple fix, but we had to see if that was the case. Then I ended up checking when there was paper inside, if there was a paper jam, whether it was in the front or the back of the printer, because it was possible for it to get jammed in two different areas. And no, either way, that was not the case. I even pulled the entire tray out to see if maybe it could have just got really jammed or stuck towards the bottom, and that wasn't the case either. And on top of that, there was no broken parts. It looked completely normal. This was just insane. So now I'm thinking, if the printer itself is fine, then maybe I gotta go and check the computer and possibly see if maybe it's not connected to that printer, because sometimes computers can just disconnect from the printers. But when I opened up the printer queue, it said the document had printed successfully. So this was becoming even more strange and confusing because the printer never actually printed it. Either the computer thinks the printer exists, which it doesn't, or the printer isn't receiving the message at all. But that was when I noticed something interesting. I looked again at the small display screen on this printer, but I seen something that I didn't see before, which was the network icon. And when you see that, it means that the printer is not connected to the PC, but it was connected through the network, meaning when somebody prints something, it is getting sent across the network to the printer. So I decided to test something out, and instead of printing from the PC, I printed a test page from the printer itself, and that ended up printing. So now we're getting somewhere. It was a perfect page, there was no issue, which told me something important, is that the printer itself wasn't broken. Good news. So now the situation changed completely, because if it's not the printer and it doesn't seem to be the PC, then it has to be what's in between that, which would be the network. Basically, something is blocking the communication. So I went back to the computer and looked at the printer settings. And that's when I saw something that most people would end up overlooking. It was that the printer was connected using a specific network address, which we all know is called an IP address. And so that's when I began to think, is it possible that it's getting printed to the wrong IP address? So I walked back to the printer that is currently having issues, and that's when I noticed, after checking the network IP address, is that the IP addresses were different, which means at some point the printer ended up restarting, which then naturally made the PC connect to another IP address automatically. So every time somebody printed something, the PC was thinking it got sent to that printer, but that printer technically doesn't exist. The printer never really received anything. And once I realized that, the fix was actually very simple. I removed the printer from the computer and re-added it again, this time using the printer's current network address. Computer reconnected to it. I then sent a test print through the PC to the printer. We all gathered around, we all waited, and boom, it started to work again. After all that confusion, the problem ended up being something very tiny hidden in the network settings. And honestly, this kind of problem happens more often than people think. And especially even with printers in general, there's so many areas where it could be like deeply hidden. and you're just like, wow, I would not have thought of that as my first option, and it happened to always be your last option. And it's like, it is crazy. Printers are weird devices. They rely on hardware, software, and networking all at once, and so it's really difficult to even pick up exactly what the issue is. But when you do break it down like that, with when you check the printer, you go to the PC, then you can realize, okay, the PC's fine, printer's fine, something in between is getting affected, and so you can kind of break it down like that. But it's not always an obvious answer when it comes to printer issues. But sometimes the problem can be something simple, but it just wasn't something that you thought to look at first, just hidden in a place where most people never check. But this is why troubleshooting technology can be very interesting, and it can also kind of in a way not be repetitive, though people say it is. Because especially with printer issues, it can always be something else, something different, like a paper jam to a network connectivity issue, to something wrong with the software, to something wrong with the computer, and so forth. I feel like it keeps things a little bit interesting, but of course, it definitely is scary when you are trying to move on a time crunch, because people need to use these printers. Solving problems like this isn't about guessing, it's about slowing down and sticking to your roots, sticking to what your checklist is, your troubleshooting checklist. Checking each possibility and checking the clues when things don't make sense, when things do, and where that can lead to. And when everything ends up clicking together, it's actually pretty satisfying, even if the problem started with something as simple as the printer. Next time a printer refuses to cooperate, it may not be broken. Probably most of the time it's not broken. Sometimes it's just hiding the real problem, and it may not be as simple or obvious as you may expect. Honestly, that's what makes troubleshooting technology both frustrating but weirdly fun at the same time. So I hope you guys ended up enjoying this video, and remember, this is not a tutorial, this is me just explaining how I fixed this very hard printer issue that nobody else could solve. Catch you on the next one. Deuces.